Great. Hi, I am Patricia Diaz. I'll introduce myself really quickly. We met last week, but this is the juicy stuff that I love to talk about. There is Nora Ephron, a famous movie producer, made a comment, made a kind of offhanded quote. I don't think she thought it was going to turn into the movement that she did, but she said that everything is copy. And she made movies like Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail, and like these really unbelievable rom-coms, right? So I titled this presentation called Everything is Content, because in the world that we live in today, everything is content. That is true, for better or for worse. So a little bit about me. I have been in marketing for a really long time. I have written and produced and created tens of thousands of pieces of content. I have lost count. Everything from kind of silly, opportunistic social media content to very weighty, meaty pieces of content that I hope made a better impact on the world. And I want to talk about everything in between. So I broke this down a little bit. What is B2B content? Because whether you realize you're consuming it or not, you are probably, if you are have made any purchasing decisions about anything at some point. I actually really hate that term. I feel like everything is, there is no business to business. It's only business to people. And there's a difference between business to business and business to consumer. And I feel like that should not exist. And I don't know why marketers put those parameters on ourselves, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So inbound content, that's what I mean by B2B content, inbound stuff that is supposed to have a direct impact on a business result, social content, and then what to do with all that stuff once you actually create it. So what are we talking about when we say content, right? Because everything is content. Social media has its own version, obviously, and we'll talk about that in a second. But everything from newsletters to emails, blogs, white papers, webinars, website copy, text messages, ebooks, infographics, videos, those are all different kinds of content that people obviously create and consume pretty regularly. Again, like, whether it's for a business need or not. Oh, wrong way. And then social media content, if we take them into two buckets, inbound content and social media content, obviously can include videos, polls and questions, contests, giveaways, UGC, influencer quotes, stats and data visualization, and ephemeral content, which is stories. Regardless of the kind of content you're making, I feel like they all pretty much should follow the same rules. Start with a clear outline that breaks down your main topic, first and foremost. Use headings and subheadings to create visual hierarchy. Include a brief summary of each section to give readers an idea of what to expect. This is specifically about inbound content, but also, depending on the distribution channel, can also relate to social media content too. The most important part of this is finding your writing style. Business copy, social media copy, regardless of where it's going, should be clear, concise, and engaging. Using simple language. Active voice is really important to me. I notice, and you will probably notice this now that I've called it out, the copywriters who use passive voice, it grates on my nerves. You'll notice it more now that I called it out. But storytelling is really at the heart of every piece of content that makes itself out into the world. I think the best copy is written like a transcript of a really great conversation. So the marketers and the creators that over-engineer every single sentence and want it to be perfect and precious, I feel like doesn't resonate. Especially now where we spend our lives online and on our phones. The overly curated, beautiful things aren't relatable, and it doesn't matter what the goal is. The more human, the better. I really firmly believe to write what you want to read. If you think it's boring, chances are your reader does too. And that applies again to social content or inbound content. But regardless of what you're creating, know your audience. Content is not one size fits all. And that is true, even if you think your audience is the same, your buyer is the same, your followers are the same. They could change even between, today and tomorrow, and especially the networks that you're distributing that content on. Your writing style is really personal, really personal. It's really, it's an art form, right? So I would never look at a Picasso or a Monet and think I'm going to rip that off and the world is going to not be the wiser, right? Like those beautiful pieces of art came from that person's soul, and writing is exactly the same. And content is exactly the same. It's even if it is transferred within marketing departments, nobody can see your vision the way that you can. And I think the best stuff that takes people to want to take action is the stuff that's written in a way that lets people into who you are as a human being, even if you are representing a brand. And I'll talk about that in a second, but content is really personal, and should it be engaging enough for your ICP, your ideal customer profile, to want to take action. So whether, it's buying something from you or wanting to learn more about your business, or following you or engaging with your content, inaction is the worst possible outcome for putting your heart and soul into something and somebody dismissing it by not doing anything. There is this How to Write guide by David Ogilvy that he wrote in a long time ago, 1982, 40 years, more than that, 41 years. And I tried to condense this, honestly, but I can't write it better than he did. So that's why I screenshotted it and put it here. But I really love that, that he reiterates the points that I made earlier, is that people who think well, write well, and good writing is not natural. We all come from different perspectives and different educational backgrounds, and we find humor in different things. And that's what makes it amazing. That's the best part of it, is that unique human perspective. But writing is a talent. Whether you're writing a tweet or a novel, copy editors are a gift from God, because not everybody can master the art so perfectly that it doesn't require another set of eyes. So I think these are worth saying out loud, because even in the 17 years that I've dedicated my life to writing in some capacity, I go back to these often. It really is kind of my North Star when I'm writing anything. Again, even if it's 150 characters, or if it's a 10,000 word essay or whatever, I would highly recommend everybody reading the Roman Rolfenson book on writing. It is as clear gets. I made this point earlier: write the way you talk. So naturally, I don't know why business jargon even became a thing. It makes me want to die. It makes everybody want to die. It's the worst. I don't want to buy anything from anybody that uses complicated words. It's soul sucking. Use short words, short sentences, and short paragraphs. Again, if you find it boring, imagine how your audience feels. Never use jargon words like reconceptualize, demassification. These words have a time and a place, right? If you are writing business literature or an academic journal, those words absolutely have a place. If you're writing a blog, they don't. I don't. He says it better than I could. They are hallmarks of a pretentious ass, and I fully agree. Never write more than 2 pages on any subject. People, especially now, this is even more so true now than it was 40 years ago, but our attention spans are not that long. So if you want somebody to do something as a result of your writing, keep it short. Check your quotations, especially now, and especially in the ChatGPT era. Everything is confirmable. I don't know if that's a word, but check your quotations, because if you make it up, somebody will call you out on it. And people love to call people out on everything on the internet. Never send a letter or a memo on the day you write it. Read it aloud the next morning and then edit it. I cannot stress this enough. Never write something and then hit publish, ever. Even if you think it is the best, most earth-shattering revelation you've ever had in your entire life. I feel like this, the world could be saved from a lot of grief if people took this a little bit more seriously on social media. If you think it is that groundbreaking today, it will be just as groundbreaking tomorrow. And it still probably needs a copy edit. If something is important, get a colleague to improve it. Two heads are better than one. Copy is no exception, because it is so personal and you only have your worldview, for better or for worse, even with the internet and the unbelievable mounds of information that we can consume. You still only have your worldview. And if you think that you are a subject matter expert on something, somebody might be too, especially if it's business content. I would never publish a blog. I would never send an email, anything, without somebody just double checking that my commas are in the right place, or, you know, that I use THAN as opposed to THEN. Spell check does not catch everything. And that, again, was true 40 years ago. It's definitely true today. Before you send your letter or memo, make sure it's crystal clear on what you want the recipient to do. This is just as important now. Like I keep saying it, but it's true. If you have no call to action, then just assume that people aren't going to do anything. It doesn't have to be overly salesy. It doesn't have to be overtly self-serving, but being explicit about what the point is saves you time, and it saves your audience time. If you want action, don't write. Go and tell the guy what you want. I think this kind of goes back to point number 9. If you want somebody to do something and you can say it in 3 words, don't write it in 10. I think that's as straightforward as it needs to be. If you want somebody to talk to your sales team, or if you want somebody to buy a product, or if you want somebody to follow you or share your content, there's really nothing wrong with asking for what you want in life or in copy. So we talked a little bit about the different kinds of content, but I don't care what anybody says. Email is not a dying technology. Think about how many emails you get on a regular basis. And writing an email subject line is, I think, the most like beautiful thing in the world. It keeps me up at night. Writing email subject lines keeps me up more than writing the most perfectly curated, witty piece of social content, because everybody reads email subject lines, even if they don't read emails, right? Think about when you wake up in the morning and your inbox is flooded with marketing emails. At least you catch, the good ones at least will catch your attention before you delete them. So keep the subject line short and attention grabbing. And I feel like that's good advice, regardless of what you're writing. People love themselves. People love to talk about themselves. They love to learn about themselves. They love to hear about things that make them unique. And personalizing email is no different. It goes a long way. And especially with marketing automation, it's really not that heavy of a lift. Provide value and focus on benefits, not just features. Again, especially in the world where it takes no effort to swipe up and buy something. It's not about, nobody cares about your, I'm sorry to say this, but nobody cares about your brand. Nobody cares about you as a business or what you have to offer. They only care about the benefit that it's going to bring to their lives. It doesn't matter if you're selling a $5 pencil or a $50,000 piece of software technology. If you can make them the hero as opposed to you, you'll have a much better chance of cutting through the noise. Creating a content strategy is hefty. It's a big ask. It's a big ask for a couple of reasons. Coming up with ideas is hard, right? Writing something is hard. Editing it and publishing it and distributing it is not for the faint of heart. It's a lot of work. And then opening yourself up to criticism and feedback once something is on the internet, whether it is, again, a white paper or a tweet. It takes guts, but it's necessary, especially in this day and age. The way that buying and selling has changed in the last even 5 years. I think the stat, please don't quote me on this. You should definitely Google it after the fact, but I want to say like 77% of buying decisions happen prior to somebody actually reaching out and saying they're ready to buy. So whether that's somebody browsing your social feed or reading the blogs on your website or getting one of your emails or whatever, they have already crafted this idea of who your brand is and how they can help your life before they even talk to anybody, before they even make the decision to buy anything. And this is where content is so important. It's the first impression before they even have a chance to talk to anybody, in totality. The old school way of marketing is the funnel, right? You think at the top of the funnel and you're trying to, if you think about inbound leads for services or software or whatever it is, 10 years ago, marketers were really concerned with filling the top of the funnel, and then it would funnel down into sales, right? So like there was a lot of people at the top, not so many people at the bottom. That doesn't really exist anymore because people spend so much time online. And top of the funnel content, or as marketers like to abbreviate it as tofu. Tofu used to be very specific to people who were not ready to buy. But now we don't get a choice. I don't get to dictate whether somebody is at the top of the funnel and ready to buy, or if they're casually browsing, because all of those pieces of content, I don't get control over when somebody reads them, right? So I might send out a tweet and somebody, links back to my company's website and they download an ebook before they read a blog, or, attend a webinar before they, scroll through my LinkedIn feed or whatever. I don't get to dictate what people are doing online. So you just have to assume that all of the content that gets created, again, whether it is a LinkedIn post or a digital book, that it's ready for everybody at every stage of the buying cycle. Creating a content strategy is so deeply personal to every organization and what your goals are. It's not one size fits all. Even if you're selling, software in a similar industry, it's not one size fits all. You can definitely do competitive research and analysis, which I would highly recommend you do before you write anything. But even then, your business, hopefully, your business offerings are unique, and you can compete with keywords, but even that I feel like is a little antiquated, to be totally honest with you. The keyword research for your audience and industry is a necessary evil, only because as marketers, we kind of got to play the game, right? For better or for worse, Google is making the rules about that game. So if you want to compete, if you want to have your content compete, even in a minuscule way, keyword research is at least going to point you in the right direction before you start writing anything. A content calendar, in my years and years of doing this, I don't think works more than a quarter at a time. So if you take 3-month chunks, I never understood the marketers who planned out their content calendar a year in advance. Think about how different the world was a year ago, right? Like what people care about now, or how even they seek out information by going to TikTok to find information as opposed to Googling it. The world moves too quickly to plan that far in advance. And I think a quarter at least gives you a good planning strategy. At least will plan out your workload, but gives you room to be agile. Regardless of how far in advance you're planning your content strategy, create content that addresses pain points, right? Like, so if somebody Googles a question, and I'll get to this in a second about how to do this, but if somebody Googles, how can I save money at my job? I like to, I don't know, I like making that up off the top of my head, but I love to create content that actually answers that question, and in a way that if I were to pick up the phone and answer their call, I would write it in the same exact way that would answer their question. Social media for content distribution. I think, well, Jen, in the hour after this, will definitely talk about this in more depth than I am right now, but it's obviously a platform to connect with potential customers. And again, kind of what I was saying a few minutes ago, you don't have control over what people see in their feeds at what time. It's not, it's not a send a LinkedIn message or a tweet or a, Facebook, whatever, any platform, and assume that your ideal audience is going to see it at that exact moment that you hit publish. But if you know your audience well enough, you know where they are, you know where they spend their time online, you know what they're searching for when they get to those platforms, who their peers are, who their colleagues are, and what problems they're trying to solve at work, and personally, at home, in their families, whatever it is. Knowing those people inside and out is definitely the right step, the first step in your content strategy. B2B companies use social media to increase brand awareness. A couple of years ago, I don't think I would have made that statement. We can go back and forth between what lead gen is versus what demand gen is, but I don't think I've talked to a marketer probably in the last year or two that would say that they are using social media specifically and intentionally for lead generation. It really is brand awareness, only because the volume of content has increased so dramatically. Everybody with an iPhone is a content creator, right? Like there's a pretty low barrier to entry. So at least having some curated story about who your brand is probably a better use of time than assuming that huge volumes of business are going to come in as a result of your social media. The caveat to that, obviously, is if you're a direct-to-consumer brand, in which case you should absolutely expect consumers to come through as a result of your social media content. In a business-to-business setting, though, social media can be used to showcase industry expertise and thought leadership, assuming that you work with very smart, well-respected people using their voice and their contribution to your social content, or even your, inbound content, is a really great thing to have. However, social media content is its own beast entirely. All of the stuff that I just talked about, being a really great writer and being really intentional about your audience still applies. A sloppy tweet sucks just as badly as a sloppy blog post. Like, nobody wants that. But I very firmly believe in creating a content strategy for inbound, that kind of plays the SEO game and is keyword optimized and at least hits a call to action for a sales decision specifically. Social media content doesn't play by any of those rules. It should run parallel to your inbound content, though. If you are publishing a blog about, I don't know, your business use case or a pain point that your customers have, and then you kind of have like a polished brand for business to business, but your social media feed is like memes. It doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense to your audience. Again, going back to that point of like, you don't have control over what people see when. They should be two totally different content strategies, but they should mirror each other. Social media that's only used as a distribution channel is boring. I never understood why marketers did that. Like, if you write a blog and you just hop on LinkedIn and you're like, read the blog, and then you completely ignore all of the other social media engagement, or even the opportunities for all of the other social content that I mentioned earlier, the videos, the polls, the UGC, the data points. It's just such a huge wasted opportunity, and it's really self-serving, and people sniff that out really quickly. So using social media as only a way to ram your message down anybody's throat I think is a surefire way to fall on deaf ears, because people sniff that out really quickly, especially since we're just inundated with it 24 hours a day. Being helpful, fun, engaging, and on trend is more important than your brand. And I have never met a CEO who wants to admit this, but it's true. Especially in this day and age where people go to social before they go to Google to find answers. Being relevant is a huge benefit, and things move quickly. Obviously I feel like I don't need to tell this crowd that, like, what was popular on TikTok even 2 weeks ago is not what's trending now. So again, going back to the point that I made earlier about this very perfectly curated, beautiful, well executed content is wonderful and lovely. but the stuff that's kind of quick and dirty and timely, I think does way better than the stuff that is overly produced. So content resources and must-haves. This is the stuff that I use on the daily. this is I use it every day in my job. There's this website called Answer the Public. When I need inspiration for content, this is usually the first place that I go. To even if I don't use the content themes that they suggest, Answer the Public, basically, like if you put in a keyword or a phrase or whatever, it shows you what people are searching for in a range of ways. So it's a really great resource to, like, if you're, trying to write content about one service offering, for example, and you're trying to relate that back to one target ICP, it's a really great way to spark inspiration. I think Canva goes without saying. It's a wonderful free resource. I highly recommend that everybody spring for Grammarly. I think it's like $120 a year. Even if you have a team of copy editors, there's been several times where Grammarly has given me pause and to think like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have said that way. And once it gets some sense of like what your writing tone is, I think it's a really great resource. There's no excuse anymore to like not use an Oxford comma. And let's not even have that debate because it's the right way to go. Good old Google. I put this screenshot on the right. If you Google literally anything, this is my favorite way to create social media content. You can type in anything to Google, like, I don't know, how to sell pencils. It doesn't matter. The part that you're looking for specifically is, what are people also asking? The section that says people also ask. So if somebody is Googling, what's the best pencil on the market right now? Whatever, insert your product here, whatever, what is the best water cup? It doesn't matter. All of these questions that people are asking here is social media gold. Because it's all content inspiration, right? Like these are actual questions that people are going to Google to answer. So while I may not write a full-blown blog post about how much do B2B writers make, it's obviously a question that people are interested in knowing the answer to. So if you are, tasked with whatever, this feature here, I feel like is the most underrated part of a Google search is people also ask. That is definitely where I get the bulk of my social media inspiration from. This is enough content right here for a month's worth of social content. It's timely, right? Like Google updates these daily. It's never the same answer twice. And again, it gives you like a bird's eye view into exactly what people actually care about as it pertains to your product or service. So why go like the roundabout way about it? Just answer the questions that people actually want to know the answers to. For keyword research, I love SEMrush. There's a free version of it. It's pretty robust, especially where competitor analysis is concerned. It does a really great job of showing you what your competitors are ranking for keyword-wise and where your website or product has gaps. I debated on even including this in this because as a marketer, the most soul-crushing question that I could ever get asked, although I get it, I understand the point, is what's the ROI, right? Like, doesn't matter what it is, what is being created or what is being sent out. As marketers, our whole jobs, our whole, the reason we exist is to prove value in some way. And writing a really beautiful piece of content is hard to quantify. It could take years to pay off. It might not. It could, you could get $1 million sale from a blog post tomorrow. It's a long game. SEO is a long game. Writing content and making sure that, your buyer today if they move on from a role, that piece of content still resonates with the buyer a year from now. So I struggle with the metrics because I get asked a lot, like, what's the ROI? Why do you spend so much time on social? Why should I ask, subject matter experts from across departments of my organization to contribute to a webinar or a podcast or a blog or whatever? And we could talk about vanity metrics, because I think that none of these things actually matter. Clicks are great, shares are great, impressions are what they are. I don't know. I wouldn't say they're I feel neutral about impressions. But engagement, I think, is a very valuable metric, good or bad, actually. And I feel like that's a bold statement to make, but I sort of believe that no press is bad press, kind of thing, where engagement is concerned. So whether people have a very strong negative reaction or a very strong positive reaction, it's a reaction. So that you at least gives you a gauge of, I struck a nerve somehow. So people are, for better or for worse, resonating with something that I said at some point in this piece of social content or a written piece of content. So if you were ever asked, like, what's the ROI on content, other than, again, like, because you have to, there's really no choice. Like, nobody's exempt, especially from marketers. You're not exempt from content. It's not even a question. Whether you're writing website copy or an email or a text message or a blog or a tweet, whatever it is, like, being a really great, thoughtful writer is the heart of really everything that we do. So again, like, I don't know, metrics are the bane of my existence, but they do pay off. I want to give a really a poignant example of this from probably 4 years ago. It's still the most personal, impactful piece of content that I've ever written in my life. I was working for a company that hosted digital credentials. So anybody who was learning anything would have verified proof of that learning. Instead of a paper certificate or whatever, you get a digital credential. And our CEO at the time was asked a question at a conference about equity. Like, our digital credentials, are they going to level the playing field, essentially? And he kind of fumbled the question. I think it took him off guard. And I watched that recording back, and I turned into a dog with a bone. It became like my life's mission to write a whole campaign's worth of content about how equitable skills can be when they're verified without the story behind the person. If it's just the skills going toe to toe, why can't women have a better chance at promotions and retention and upskilling and all of those wonderful things that come along with learning something? So I created a white paper and hosted webinars and created blog content and social content. And it really kind of took on a life of its own. And it ended up being like, I don't say this to pat myself on the back here. I say this because inspiration comes from anything, but that it turned into one of the foundational pillars of the business because of that kind of offhanded question that our CEO couldn't answer, turned into all of these really wonderful pieces of content that proved that skills are skills regardless of who is earning them, right? Like, if you have proof of skills, who cares if you're a man or a woman? The proof of competency should speak for itself. And that it was hard to quantify until 3 years later, after I initially published that white paper. It literally took 3 years for a Fortune 100 company to come and say, we have a DE&I initiative where we want to upskill and we want to identify more women in our organization who have the same skills as men. And we happen to stumble upon a white paper from several years ago, and we think, it would be an interesting conversation to have. So initially, when I went to my boss and said, listen, I'm going to kind of go in gun blazing on this. I feel really strongly about it, and I have no idea what the payoff is going to be. But I feel really strongly about it, and I think we have enough data to support it, and I want to do it. And he let me run with it. And if he would have asked me then, what's the ROI of that white paper? I would have said, I have no friggin' clue. I have no idea. I just have a gut feeling. He probably would have laughed at me and said, absolutely not. But the fact that he let me take the time and really thoughtfully research that whole campaign, and then it ended up coming to fruition, with a really huge contract a couple years later, was like the most validating thing. But even if it didn't, it was still like, I feel very proud about that contribution to the rhetoric of, women are just as smart as men, and I'll die on that hill. And having proof of that skill, yeah, and having a forum to like talk about that was great. It came from my perspective, right? Like, I'm obviously a woman. It was a really great conversation to have about equity in the workplace. And I feel like, again, if I was asked about the ROI of a piece of content, it never would have seen the light of day. So as personal and as heart-wrenching as content can be sometimes you just got to go for it. You just got to go for it and trust your gut, and worry about the metrics later. That's all she wrote. No pun intended.
Awesome. Thank you, Patricia. This was great. So we have one question here that you might have actually clarified already. And Maya is asking, can you clarify what inbound content is? So maybe just touch base again on what inbound and outbound content marketing is.
Yeah. So inbound is somebody who finds you. So yeah, they come to you essentially, whether it is through a blog or a social post or whatever it is. They deliberately take action. So your buyer or your prospect or whatever makes some sort of statement about how, or some sort of action about how they want to be involved with your business in some capacity. That's inbound. So even if it's registering for a webinar or downloading a podcast, having some sort of identifiable information about who those people are, they've raised their hands and expressed interest. Outbound is the opposite of that. It's the business seeking buyers who may not be ready to buy, but or have any knowledge or back history of your company at all. It's the difference between hunting and gathering, right? Outbound is hunting, inbound is gathering.
And to take that one step further, actually, all of you that are in this session right now, you essentially self-selected into the program. So our effort there was essentially a mix of inbound and outbound, but mostly inbound. We just put the thing up, and then it attracted all of you folks to it, and you signed up, and here you are.
Yep.
Are there other questions or thoughts for Patricia? So I have a question for you, and this is something that we're all experiencing on the practicing level, and this is something that I've actually had to change my classes, or will be changing my classes to adapt to, and that's of course all of the AI tools, the machine learning tools, ChatGPT, etc. And I know that so many of you have heard those terms, heard that organization, that tool, but there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of AI tools at this point.
Yeah.
They all do a wide variety of different things. There's 4 different versions of ChatGPT, but you could use Midjourney to generate images. There are tools that you can use to generate video, audio. There's one tool where you essentially create like a fully animatable version of your face, and then you record some lines of dialogue, and it's able to create a whole vocabulary in your voice. Yeah. And it's like really, really freaky. But outside of, so like with ChatGPT, I'm using it a little bit at Pitt, not for the purposes of generating content that will be pushed out to our audiences. But right now we're taking it step by step, and we're using it for prototyping. So we're developing campaign concepts, and then we'll build the prototypes for those. If it's a website, student stories, all of that stuff. And we were able to do that in just a couple days. And now we've gone from this level of concept to being able to pitch our colleagues in different schools on like these particular campaigns, these stories. And it's really supercharging our enthusiasm and our creativity. So outside of maybe your experience with ChatGPT, have you touched on any of the other types of tools that are out there? And do you see a potential formula for using some of these tools in combination with one another to
Totally.
effectively create content that gets beyond that created with AI scanner, so to
Yeah,
speak?
right. Yes. I think AI tools are a wonderful resource for inspiration. I do not in any capacity live in fear that a robot is going to take over my job, for the simple reason that a robot will never have the breadth of experience that a human being does. And if the goal is volume, then AI tools are wonderful. You know, the marketers could be obsolete if that was the only goal. But I don't think that that's what people want en masse. I think people want, that's why TikTok is so popular, right? Like people want glimpses into actual human beings' lives. And I think that AI tools are really, really powerful, again, in taking a lot of information and turning it into something a little bit more digestible or actionable. And then I am incredibly grateful for that. I think that's like that really does take away some of like the boring parts of my job that I don't want to deal with. You know, I want to get to the good stuff, the storytelling, the relational engagement, all of the stuff that, like, you know, the internet is wonderful for. I think AI tools can be used as a resource. It's when it turns into the go-to that I'm worried about marketing shifting from being robotic, because I don't want to read content that's written by a robot.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't care how good it is.
it's totally flavorless.
Yeah.
You know, like there is a
Right.
noticeable lack of like really, you know,
Human emotion.
adjectives, emotionally
Yeah.
charged adjectives and descriptive words and phrases.
Right.
Yeah. So Valerie has a comment here that I'd actually respond to first. She says, I actually heard on the radio that a lot of jobs want you to know how to use ChatGPT and AI tools. It was interesting because I didn't realize that would be an important thing to know how to use for a job. And
Yeah.
my first comment to that is, and it's one that has been repeated, is that marketers are not going to face, you know, massive job loss because of AI. It's specifically marketers that refuse to learn how to use
Totally.
these tools that will see massive job loss.
I
Their
totally agree.
their inability or lack of desire to adapt to innovation happening now, especially
Yeah,
when it's accessible. If they refuse to do that, they're dead in the water.
I agree. Remember, well, nobody on, I don't think anybody on this call is old enough to remember this, but when Microsoft came out with like Excel, every accountants panicked and thought like, oh, that's it. You know, if a tool can create a pivot table, like what good am I? I think that AI tools to marketers are pretty much the same exact thing. First of all, marketers are inundated with tools and changing technology. Like even I started out writing pitch books 17 years ago. Okay. Like an actual physical book that, you know, our sales team would bring to meetings. If I were to even catch a whiff of that now, I would laugh in somebody's face. The technology demands that we face are so frequent and so ever changing that I just think, yeah, AI it's a skill to learn first and foremost, just like Excel is, right? Like not everybody's great at it. And I think AI tools like ChatGPT are going to be the exact same thing. It's not something that you can just stumble into. I think you have to be very thoughtful and intentional about how to use it and what you want as a result of it. In the same way that you would any other tool, Canva, Excel, PowerPoint, like those are skills that marketers and everybody else needs to learn. Yeah, I don't think it's any exception.
Yeah, we're actually, as an aside, on the AMA side, we're working on a marketing ethics program, and you know, we're trying to create some curriculum, some programming for ethics in marketing with relationship to AI usage.
Good.
Yeah, and really trying to create some North Star there for our marketing folks. And it's increasingly hard to do because this technology is changing every single day. In
Right.
fact, I subscribe to a newsletter. I get a new one every day, and in it there are at least 10 new AI tools. So there's like a ton of over duplication of effort.
Right.
But what's interesting is on like a capitalistic point of view, like these are all startup companies that are fighting each other for market.
Yeah, it's a race to the bottom. Totally.
Yeah, race to the bottom. Yeah. And so ironically, like it's ChatGPT, which is the most accessible and affordable out of all of them, that is still winning the day. So Savannah actually has a question here. She says, how do you find the balance of creating vulnerable content without compromising privacy and personal boundaries? That's a great question.
That is a great question. That is as personal as the underwear you picked out this morning. I can't answer that for you. I can answer it for myself. I made a decision really early on in my career that if I was going to do it, I was going to do it wholly. And I wanted the personal branding part of the content that I was creating on behalf of companies to, it was kind of, it was opportunistic, to be totally honest with you. Like if I was going to pour my heart and soul out of it, I didn't just want the company that I was working for to get the benefit. I wanted myself to get the benefit. And I could have taken two paths, right? Like one was being totally on brand and only working within the parameters of brand guidelines. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. I don't like reading it. I don't like writing it. I don't like talking about it. I feel like it's soul sucking. And that's the kind of stuff that like gives marketers a bad name, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that just, it takes the life out of everything. And when I decided that I was going to marry a brand with who I am personally, I actually had a really like personal conversation with my husband, because especially like that conversation that I went in earlier about like women in the workforce, that was like something very personal to me. Like that really mattered to me, and I can only write it from my perspective. And trying to convince men in leadership positions to implement a software technology that would be more equitable to women, I could only tell that story from my perspective, right? It was either I was not going to say anything, or I was going to say it wholly from my perspective, because it impacted my life and I felt really strongly about it. I will say there are definitely some things that are off limits. I would never use my kids for content, because they're going to have their own digital footprint someday, and that's not my life to share. So especially for business content, that's a hell no. I would never use my kids for content like that. Everything else, I feel like if it helps somebody in some way, from my perspective, I'm willing to try it, even if it does open me up to scrutiny and criticism. I don't know. I feel like none of us have the choice anymore about being fully offline, right? Like whether you want to or not. You either dictate the conversation or somebody else does about you. And I would rather be in control of that narrative than leave it up to chance. So while it may seem like there are some things that get married with business in my personal life, it's very calculated and curated in a way of like, I'm not going to tell you everything, but I am going to tell you the most honest, raw truth from my perspective, because that's all I have. So I hope that answers your question. If it feels wrong to you, then don't do it. I think that should just be your
motto. Yeah. There's a heaping helpful of common sense there.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions for Patricia at the moment? All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, Patricia. This was great. And similar to Nora's presentation earlier, I have no doubt people are going to do a second or a third dive into your content. It was fantastic. Thank you again. And feel free to stick around for Jen's presentation. So what we'll do, folks, is we'll take a 5 to 10 minute break here and get started right at the top of 8 o'clock. Okay. So we'll see you in like 10 minutes.